Hey guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here, and I am here to talk to you about a graphic novel that I recently finished reading, Godzilla Cataclysm by Cullen Bunn and Dave Wachter. This was a 5-issue miniseries from IDW, and this was a really great story. A while back I reviewed a Godzilla miniseries, or it was the first arc of an ongoing series by Dwayne Swerzinski and an artist named Gain, and I did not really care for that story. And in reviewing this book, I feel like I'm going to keep coming back to that Swerzinski story, where I say, I wish that story could have been more like this one. And not to throw that one under the bus, but I feel like it's going to be really hard for me to talk about this book without talking about what went wrong in that other book. Number one, Godzilla is actually a prominently featured item in this story. I hate to say character because Godzilla is not a character. Like I said in that other review, Godzilla is a force of nature. And here, they don't forget that. Godzilla is still a force of nature. But unlike that other story, Godzilla is the most prominently featured monster in this story. There are other monsters like Mothra and later on Destroya, but Godzilla is not overshadowed by any of those monsters, which I feel like Godzilla was overshadowed by some of the monsters in that other Godzilla story. Here, that is not a problem, and I was very happy to see Godzilla featured just the right amount in this story. Also, instead of being just 4 issues long, this book is 5 issues long, and I feel like it's really able to take the story and make it happen at the correct pace. With 5 issues, it's able to go along at just the right speed, and if it had only been 4 issues, I think like that other book, I would have been complaining that things wrapped up too quickly. I really think that we needed 5 issues for this story to happen at the pace that it does, and I was really happy with the pace that we had here, and I'm really glad that we had 5 issues to kind of let this story play out in the way that it needed to play out, which was kind of a complaint that I had about that other Godzilla story. Also, that one Godzilla story that I've been talking about, it tries to have human characters be at the forefront of the story, but one problem that I had with that book was that the human characters weren't really developed or kind of explored any. We just know that they each have a grudge against one of these monsters that have been fighting each other, but we don't really know anything else beyond that. In this book, we have 3 characters, and 2 of them aren't really explored a whole lot, but they do feel like real characters who are reacting to a situation in a real way that human beings would. The other character, the grandfather of one of the other 2 characters, he feels very real, and he's explored in a way that is very interesting, and it makes me want to see the prequel story that kind of sets up the events of this story. And I don't know if there is a prequel story, but I kind of wish there was, and I kind of wish it would be focusing on the grandfather character when he was younger. But I really liked that character. I liked all of the characters that are focused on in the story. Of the 3 characters, I really liked them all, and I felt like they all felt like very real characters, and they all had kind of different approaches to what's going on in the story, but they all were very likable characters who are just trying to survive in this new world order. And I should go ahead and talk about the story here a little bit. Most of the time, when you see a Godzilla story, or really any giant kaiju story, it is a giant kaiju that is in basically the modern day Earth in an urban setting, fighting another monster or fighting the military. That's usually the setting that you have going on in just about any kaiju story at all. Here, that is not the case. This is set at least 20 years in the future. I want to say that it does say that it's 20 years in the future, but it might be a little further than that. But basically, humanity is gone. All of the major cities have been completely destroyed by the monsters, and we find out why that is in this story, and it's a really neat reveal. I won't reveal to you why the monsters destroy the cities, but then they come back. And again, it's a really neat reveal why these monsters are coming back. There's one particular monster who kind of acts as a subplot or as a kind of a catalyst for the plot to happen, and that's handled in a really interesting way. I've never seen a kaiju story set in a post-apocalyptic world, and I really like that this story was able to do that, and that was something that you don't see very often, and I kind of wish that you could see more of that, more of the aftermath. This is what happens after the kaiju destroy the planet, and that's about all that I have to say about this book. I really enjoyed this. There was one problem that I had, and that is that at the very end of issue 4, there is another monster introduced, Destroya. I don't know how to say that monster's name, but throughout the first 4 issues, you have these monsters who are in the story. Godzilla, Mothra, Biolante, and there's one other one that has a name I can't pronounce. They're all in this story throughout all 5 issues. But then at the very end of issue 4, it's like, hey, here's another monster we're going to throw into the story at the very last minute. And I'm not not really sure how else you could have had this story wrap up in the way that it does without throwing an extra monster into the story at the very end of it, especially a monster who basically is seen as being the devil. From what I understand, Destroya is basically meant to be the ultimate evil, and Godzilla, he's only meant to be kind of evil. Sometimes he's an enemy of humankind, sometimes he's the savior of humankind, and throughout most of this story, Godzilla is kind of the enemy of humankind, and we need something to kind of make Godzilla become the savior by the end of the story, if you want the story to happen in the way that it does. And I like the way the story happens, so I'm not really sure how else you could have had the story play out without introducing that monster near the very end of issue 4. But it does feel a little abrupt, like, hold on a second, the story is almost over, and now you're introducing another monster into the mix. But that was really my only problem with this story. I really liked it. I highly recommend Godzilla Cataclysm. If you haven't read it, if you're not a huge Godzilla fan, I still recommend that you read this. I found it to be very enjoyable, and I am eagerly looking forward to reading more Godzilla comics from IDW. That first one that I read by Swarzynski and Gain, not to keep throwing it under the bus and saying, man, that was one of the worst things ever, because it wasn't the worst thing ever, but I do hope that that was just a fluke, and that some of the other Godzilla comics that I seek out are not as mediocre as that one was. I hope that more of them can be on par with this story, which I really love. So those are my thoughts on Godzilla Cataclysm. What did you guys think of this book? If you liked this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the future with some more videos. In the meantime, you have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.